Hello. I've just come across a story, a news report that I'm sure will rile a lot of people. So I want to just weigh into it and share my thoughts. This is from the BBC. It was on this morning, on the BBC Breakfast News, and I'm just reading here from their article. This is the headline. I'll read out the whole article because it's not too long, so bear with me. Bath Spa University chief paid £800,000 in final year. A University Vice-Chancellor received more than £800,000 in her final year in post, it has been revealed. Accounts for Bath Spa University show Professor Christina Slade was paid £429,000 for loss of office on top of her £250,000 salary and other benefits. The University and College Union (UCU) has called for an urgent overhaul of senior pay at British universities. Spokeswoman for the university said the sum was considered to represent value for money. Professor Slade, who served as Vice Chancellor until August, was also given a housing allowance of £20,000 and another £20,000 for other benefits in kind. There were also pension contributions of £89,000. In total, she received a pay package including benefits and pensions worth £808,000. Oh, that little extra £8,000 means nothing. A spokeswoman for the university said, having taken legal advice, the university paid Professor Slade a sum of which reflected her contractual and statutory entitlements and was considered to represent value for money. She said that the Vice Chancellor's salary was decided by a pay committee which did not include the Vice Chancellor or staff. The committee was mindful of the need to respond to concerns about excessive salaries, take into account the performance of the university, she added. The new revelations came on the day it emerged the retirement teams of Britain's highest paid Vice-Chancellor are being investigated by a watchdog. Professor Dame Glenys Breakwell announced she was resigning from the University of Bath after a row over her £468,000 salary. UCU General Secretary Sally Hunt said that when it came to senior pay in universities, many vice-chancellors and senior staff look like they're living on a different planet. She called for greater transparency into how senior pay awards were decided with staff and students included in remuneration committees. We've seen what happens when decisions are taken in secret without proper checks and balances, she added. This simply cannot be allowed to continue. We need an urgent overhaul of how senior pay and perks are determined and how our universities are governed. I totally agree with that. I think Sally Hunt is absolutely right. Um, I have to say, I think this is perverse, and I appreciate that the Vice Chancellor herself was not on the committee. Um, but this is an extraordinarily large amount of money. We're talking almost £1 million here. Um, and I just find it baffling. What I find is that the audacity that they have to say that the committee was mindful. The spokeswoman claimed the committee was mindful of the need to respond to concerns about excessive salaries and take into account the performance of the university. Why lie? Why lie? That's nonsense. You weren't mindful, because if you were mindful, then we wouldn't be seeing this situation. Now, technically, legally, there may be nothing wrong. Okay, so she's had legal advice, or the pay remuneration has been taken into legal consideration, but the the common sense aspect hasn't been taken into consideration, and that just is an indication of how divided this country is. There are people out there living in a bubble. Now, to be clear, I know that vice chancellors in universities have a degree of responsibility. Universities have seats of learning, are seats of learning. Um, so when they do research and so on, a lot of that does end up being reflected in the vice chancellor. Incidentally, I've never understood what the role of the chancellor is, because it's always the vice chancellor. So that seems to be where the real power is. But it's a bit. I think it's a bit more than an honorary title. I think there is quite a lot at stake, in terms of, when a university is brought into disrepute, often the vice chancellor has to weigh into it. So I'm not suggesting that her job was easy, right? I concede that. Probably wasn't a very easy job, particularly with the environment of universities nowadays. But consider this: the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom gets, I believe it's £240,000. the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, a world leader who has to constantly think about every decision she makes will impact 66 million people. I would argue Theresa May has a far, far more important and pressurizing job than the Vice Chancellor of one university. I mean, for goodness sake, a Vice Chancellor getting 4 times as much as the Prime Minister is utterly perverse. But there is a lot of things this opens up. Firstly, it shatters the myth of so-called of this idea that women are not paid as much as men. In the academic world, it looks like some of the richest people around are women. Um, so I think that shatters the myth, certainly when it comes to the academic field. There are some very rich women involved in academia in this country, and I don't think anyone could rationally dispute that. But this is just, to me, it's not about, I'm not jealous of it. Okay, I'm not a vice chancellor of a university, but proportionality is important. And I do think at a time when many people around the country are struggling, a lot of people are going to be baffled at how such an excessive amount of money can be justified. Now, legally, I'm sure they'll find some bureaucratic way to explain it. I'm sure legally it's sound. Morally, and from a point of view of sheer common sense, it's just too much. It is just too much. And if this chancellor had some integrity, she should donate some of that to charity or give some sort of goodwill gesture. I doubt that she will, but it's just too much. It's as simple as that. I'm not a socialist. I don't believe every single person should get exactly the same pay. I'm a realist. I know that in economics, you're going to have all sorts of always going to have a hierarchy in this situation because the situation where everyone's paid the same is never going to happen. I get that, but it's just a perversely greedy amount of money. And I appreciate she herself didn't make the decision, but this committee needs to get a grip. They claim they took the concerns on board. That to me demonstrates arrogance. Why? Because they're lying. They didn't take the concerns on board. If they did, she would simply not be getting this amount of money. So to me, it's adding insult to injury by claiming they took the concerns on board. They didn't. Let me know your thoughts. And I want to be clear here, this isn't coming from a point of view of jealousy. Um, I personally, if I was given that amount of money, I would feel awkward about it, and I would feel obliged to give something to charity because I think it's just too much. I'm not saying her job was easy. I'm not saying that there wasn't some pressures involved. I'm sure there were, you know, and I'm not the sort of person to overly judge the nature of someone's job. But I do think that common sense dictates that the Prime Minister should not be getting a lower salary, much lower salary, than a Vice Chancellor of a single university. I would argue that government ministers deserve more than a Vice Chancellor of a single university, at least senior government ministers. People say politicians are paid too much. Actually, in the grand scheme of things, politicians are not paid the way that academics are. They're not paid the way sports people are. They're not paid the way singers are. They're not paid the way bankers are. Politicians are actually quite far down the list in terms of the wealthy, put it that way. Um, and of course, there's the argument there are people who do some very dangerous frontline work, very pressurizing frontline work, junior doctors, nurses, soldiers. Um, I appreciate that we're never going to have a situation where everyone's paid exactly the same. And clearly, when someone has more responsibility, they should be paid more, but not this amount. It's a perversely greedy amount of money. I'm not saying that she is personally greedy, but then again, she's not turning it down. And in my opinion, if she had integrity, she would be making some sort of statement like, I feel this is too much. I'm going to donate part to charity, something like that. It's just too much.